Did you ever watch the TV show 24? In 24 hours, the hero, Jack Bauer, saved the United States. Every hour ended with a cliffhanger. And it's unbelievable what all happened in 24 hours. But it's TV, so reality can be suspended. In 24 hours, Jack is arrested, shot, held captive, escapes, figures out who's behind the evil plot, falls in love, falls out of love, gets arrested again, breaks out of a holding cell, ultimately saves the day. Now that's 24 hours. You can't do all that in 24 hours, and I'd rather you not try. But a lot can happen in one day. And if you had to pick the most important 24 hours of your life, what would it be? Some of you might pick the day you were born. You might pick your wedding day or the day you got engaged. You might choose the day your child was born or the day your first grandchild was born. The day you graduated from college, finally. When you finally broke your addiction and found freedom. The day you paid off your last credit card. That's a good day. The day you landed your dream job. Maybe you would pick the day you were pronounced cancer-free or the day you committed your life to Jesus. Your pick might be a good day, might be a bad day, but regardless, you would pick 24 hours that impacted the rest of your life. Well, when it comes to the most important 24 hours in Jesus' life, there's no doubt. And for the next 6 weeks, we're going to be looking at the most important 24 hours in history. 24 hours that are the foundation of our faith. 24 hours that led to your salvation. 24 hours in the life of Jesus that's the reason he came to earth. 24 hours that changed the world. Most of the time we only talk about these 24 hours on Easter Sunday, maybe Palm Sunday. But if your goal is to be a lifelong follower of Jesus who really knows him, you've got to slow it down, take some time, and learn from these pivotal moments in Jesus' life. These 24 hours led to the cross, to the tomb, ultimately to his resurrection. Now, it would take me 24 hours of teaching. It would take 48 weeks to completely deal with every detail and every teaching of Jesus in these key 24 hours. We could spend a whole year on this. I'm not going to do that. But instead, over the next 6 weeks, I'm going to attempt to focus on the most pivotal moments in words. It all started in an upper room with an event we call the Last Supper. This is Jesus' final night with his disciples before his arrest and crucifixion. It was a motion-packed, tension-filled evening. And it started with an incredibly counterculture lesson that goes against almost everything culture and society teaches. We live and we work in a competitive society. We admire people who are rich and famous and powerful. There's enormous pressure for us to climb the ladder of success. I Googled the words personal power and got over 245 million results. Things like 5 steps to personal power, how to boost your personal power, create personal power, channel your personal power, develop your personal power. It's all about being bigger, stronger, higher than the people around you. And sadly, that way of thinking even carries over into the church world. Some people come to church looking for power, for something to run, for something to control, something to boss. They want a title or they want a position because everyone knows that's the way to power and influence. We seem to be on an endless quest for the spotlight. We want recognition and honor. We want people to follow our lead, to listen to our thoughts and ideas. We want other people to ask us for advice. We want to be special and treated that way because we are somebody. We matter. We're important. Now, I know you'd never say it that way out loud, but you may think it. And that thinking affects what you do, what you say, and how you treat others. You want me to park a long way away? Not me. I've been a member of this church for years. I've paid my dues. I'm parking right here. Parking in a remote lot, that's for other people. That's not for me. You want me to drive a shuttle in the parking lot? I'm too good for that. I need an important job. Sacrifice for missions? Forget it. No way. I've got more important things to spend my money on. I'm a tithe-paying member. They better pay attention to me. By the way, I've learned over the years, when someone says that, they're not. You can count on it every time. Teach kids, work in the nursery. Don't they know who I am? We want the title, the power, the spotlight, and the recognition. And that's not a new way of thinking. People have thought that way for generations. Even Jesus' closest followers struggled with that. And so Jesus did and said something to turn our way of thinking completely upside down. All four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, tell the story of the Last Supper. Primarily, I'm going to use the account from John, beginning in chapter 13. But before we start the passage, let me set the stage. You've probably seen the famous painting by Leonardo da Vinci of the Last Supper. And it's Jesus and his disciples kind of sitting at a banquet type table, and they're all facing out and looking out, kind of like a head table, which I hate sitting at head tables because you have no one to talk to. You're just staring at people who stare at you while you eat your food. But that's not really an accurate depiction from history, culture of the day. Instead, they sat at a table that was low to the floor. The feet under the table, they lounged. Maybe they sat on pillows or leaned back on pillows. In this case, it's Jesus and 12 disciples around a table just like this. And it's not a formal setting. It's not like banquets where you don't really talk to each other. Instead, this is more like a family dinner. This is a warm, friendly social gathering. And they sat close around this table and passed the food and talked to each other. We're close to each other. This is a warm, intimate setting. It's also a setting that if you're out of shape, you'd never get up from dinner. You just stay down there the whole time. So pretty important it kept you healthy, or you'd be stuck. Well, that's more an accurate setting of what it was. We pick it up in John 13. It was just before the Passover feast. Jesus knew the time had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he now showed them the full extent of his love. The evening meal was being served. The devil had already prompted Judas Iscariot, son of Simon, to betray Jesus, which Jesus knew. Jesus knew what was in Judas's heart. Jesus knew what was coming next. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power, that he'd come from God and was returning to God. All things under his power. It was the ultimate strength position. Jesus had all the power in heaven and in earth. He was over everyone. He was over everything. You expect someone in that kind of power position to make demands, leading, ruling, being served. Instead, Jesus did something totally unexpected. He got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, wrapped a towel around his waist. Jesus took off his robe, so he was dressed now like a humble servant. He wrapped a towel around his waist, again like a servant. He picked up a pitcher, a basin, and he got ready. And the disciples were silent. No one knew what was going to happen next. And after that, he poured water into a basin, began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with a towel that was wrapped around him. In those days, roads weren't covered with asphalt or concrete. They were dirt. They were mud. Men wore sandals. And after walking through town, their feet were dirty, dusty, smelly. And it was the job of a low-level servant to wash the feet of everyone who came in the house. In this instance, for some reason, no one washed their feet. None of the disciples took the initiative because, after all, they were important. Washing feet was an important ritual. It was an act of hospitality and hygiene. It was a religious ritual of cleansing. At the same time, it was completely demeaning. It was only done by slaves. And so they're all sitting around that table. Remember, they're lounging on the floor. And Jesus, on his own, assumed the role of a servant. And he took a towel. And he got it ready. And then he took a big bowl, carefully poured some water into it, and then he started around the table. And I don't know where he started, but he went to one disciple, and remember, they're sitting on the ground. And so Jesus had to kneel down on hands and feet and take his feet, put them in the bowl, and gently wash his feet. And then Jesus shuffled over to the next one and washed his feet. When he got to Peter, Peter tried to stop him. Peter said, "Not my feet, Lord, you can't do this." But Jesus insisted. Jesus humbled himself, and he took the role of servant. In just a few short hours, Jesus would go to the cross to die for the sins of all mankind. Remember, Jesus knew where he was headed. But the Son of Man, the Son of God, the Savior of the world, humbled himself like a servant, bowed at their feet, and washed. And you can imagine how emotional that moment must have been. I imagine the room was very quiet. I don't know what Jesus might have said to each disciple as he got to them and washed their feet. But I think there were probably a lot of tears around that table that evening. And the disciples, for as long as they lived, they would never forget the moment that Jesus himself, God's only Son, picked up a towel, took a bowl, became a servant to them, and washed their feet. If you went around the room, the last guy that should have been washing feet was Jesus. But the first became last, humbled himself, he bowed, and he served them by washing their feet. And when he'd finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes, returned to his place. "Do you understand what I've done for you?" he asked them. "You call me teacher and Lord. Rightly so. That is what I am. But now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you should also wash one another's feet." So we're supposed to watch these others' feet. How often? What's that look like? How are we going to find that many bowls and towels? Jesus explained further. It was an example. It was a demonstration. "I've set an example. You should do as I've done for you. I tell you the truth. No servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them." We all want to be blessed, but what is the modern day equivalent of foot washing? I had a lot of thoughts, a lot of answers. Finally, it came down to this. The modern day equivalent of foot washing is others first and me last. It's serving others instead of expecting to be served yourself. Foot washing is being so committed to others that you're willing to make yourself like a servant. It's choosing to go last even when you deserve to be first. It's doing the job or doing the ministry that no one else is willing to do, not because you have to, but because you choose to. It's honoring others regardless of whether you get something for it. It's talking good about others instead of trying to get others to talk good about you. It's doing the job no one notices. It's giving up the spotlight and the recognition, the attention that comes with position. It's instead shining the light on others. This isn't natural. We don't automatically do this. It's not our nature. Instead, it's a decision. It is a daily lifestyle decision. I'm not going to just put others first. I'm going to intentionally put me last. I'm going to attempt to follow the command of Jesus, and I'm going to lead by serving. What would a church look like if we all thought others first and me last? If we looked for opportunities to humble ourselves intentionally and to serve others, what would a choir look like? What would a student ministry look like? What would a leadership team look like? What would the parking lot look like? Can you imagine? You could get here last minute. Every spot close to the building would be open. You couldn't find a spot on the remote lots. Maybe that's the modern day equivalent of foot washing. The bathrooms would always be spotless, and every time you went in, somebody would be wiping off the counter, picking up paper towels. Maybe that's it. Maybe that's the modern day equivalent. We'd have a waiting list to work in the nursery. We'd have to say, I'm sorry, 6 months from now, you can be involved changing diapers. Everyone would want the high work, low visibility, no glory jobs. Maybe that's what foot washing is. Here's the key question. How would you act if you really decided that other people mattered more than you and you made your goal serving others? For some of you, this might be a key. You've tried to prove that you matter. It's time instead to tell other people how much they matter. You've looked for ways to be important. Instead, it's time to make other people important. You've tried to make sure everyone knows how good you are or how good you did. Change your approach and look for the good in others. You've been on an endless quest for self-worth and recognition. You know what it's time to do? It's time to give someone else worth and recognition. It's time to wash their feet. You want a position of honor so badly. Maybe like Jesus, you should honor someone else. Quit worrying about how you should be treated and start worrying about how you treat others. Why? Because the Son of God took a towel and a bowl and knelt and washed dirty, stinky feet. And when he was done, he said, now that you've seen me do this, you go do the same. Do you think Jesus really meant that? The key to leading is serving. We're so worried about what we want, what we need, what we deserve. It's all about me, me, me. How about doing the exact opposite and serving others? What would a church be like if everyone caught that, the Jesus model of leadership, serving? What kind of impact would that church have on its community? Can you imagine the message that would send to people that didn't have a relationship with Jesus? Everyone who would talk about the church whose focus was serving and loving others. We're seeing just a little bit of that in Share Your Lunch, as we selflessly serve the hungry and people try to figure out what kind of crazy people give 10 tons of food in 3 weeks. And then in verse 34 and 35, Jesus drove home the point with this powerful command. A new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, you, what's that next word? Must love one another. Jesus didn't say, I have a big request of you, or I've got a suggestion, something I want you to try. No, this is not optional. This is a command. If you want to be a lifelong follower of Jesus, this is part of the deal. You have to do this. And you say, but Pastor Rod, they haven't been nice to me. They're saying mean things. Jesus really couldn't have meant that. Look again. Jesus said, as I have loved you, you must love one another. How did Jesus love you? He left the glory of heaven and he came to earth. He set aside lordship and he became a servant. The disciples didn't know it, but Jesus was about to die for them and for us. Jesus set the example of humility and sacrifice. He loved people who loved him, and he loved people who were cruel to him. That's how we're supposed to love. And why does that matter so much? Look what Jesus says next. He said, you must love one another. By this, everyone will know you're my disciples if you love one another. It's a strong statement. Our love for each other is the evidence that we are followers of Jesus. I want to take a moment. I want to explain something, because this verse and the one we're about to read are why I'm so tough on gossip and dysfunctional conflict resolution. There's a lot riding on it. When we don't evidence love for each other. If you gossip and gripe and complain about other followers of Jesus, you completely invalidate your testimony. People watching you are no longer able to recognize you as Jesus' disciple. Instead, you're just like them. The picture is, what you say about Pastor Patrick when you're at work will either convince people you follow Jesus, or it will prove that you don't. What you say about me, what you say about Jamie, what you say about Pam, demonstrates one way or the other whether you're following Jesus. And you say, well, I don't believe that, Pastor Rod. Then you're calling Jesus a liar and deciding that you know better than God himself. Say, well, you just don't want anyone to express their opinion. No, not quite. I don't want anyone to express their opinion unless that opinion is framed by and laced with love. Way too many opinions are expressed in anger rather than love. I love diversity of styles and opinions, as long as they're wrapped in love. I don't want anyone to discredit the cause of Christ because they can't control their emotions and they refuse to obey Jesus' command. Now, I understand that's tough. But we have tolerated people disobeying Jesus in the name of Jesus for far too long. If the way people know we're his disciples is our love one for another, then our lack of love proves we are not his disciples. The primary teaching of Jesus at the Last Supper was opt out of the race for power, for status, and position. Instead, serve and love each other. You know what? If we get those two things right, it would be absolutely unbelievable the impact we would have on our community. It wouldn't matter if our building was beautiful or if we had the latest technology, a perfect cup of coffee, every note right in the worship, the most comfortable seats, the most convenient parking, the best preaching in town. None of that would matter. If we serve and love each other and serve others, we wouldn't have enough services to fit the people. That's counterculture. That's unexpected. In a me-first world, an others-first church stands out as a light to that world. I struggled with how to end this message because I thought of just getting enough bowls and towels and hopefully warm water, passing them out, having an old-fashioned foot washing. Anybody grew up in a church where they did foot washing? Yeah, the problem is I don't like feet. And that it'd be pretty neat, but I'm not sure we have the space to do it. I think this is a message that you apply and you live out at your school, your workplace, in the community, at home, as well as church. Serve others. Find a place to be a servant. When you serve, you're like Jesus. The director of workforce services for the state of Arkansas attends our church. He's got a staff of 700 and a budget over $1 billion. Do you know what his ministry is? He drives a shuttle on Sunday morning. He serves people and he loves it. He's not looking for a title or a place of authority. Daryl loves serving. It's a good discipline for all of us. Serve others here. Look for ways to serve others in every arena of your life. Humble yourself and serve, and God will follow that. God will honor that as you follow the example of Jesus. Love each other. Love other followers of Jesus, even if they aren't like you. Look past age and race and style of dress. Look past your differences and love with all you got. And when you do, people will recognize you as followers of Jesus. Your life will shine. Serve, love. God will use that in remarkable ways to build his kingdom. You figure out what that means for you and find a place to serve.